What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Between Two Tackles. I'm your host, Alex Pinelli, and alongside me, as always, is Ray Volo. Ray, my man, how are we feeling? We are back. We took a month off from the 2024 draft. We are back for summer scouting. We are starting with the quarterbacks. This is also the first ever video for our YouTube channel at Between Two Tackles, so go check us out. Ray, my man, how are we feeling? Welcome back, buddy.
Dude, it's crazy just thinking it's end of June and we're already getting into the 2025 class. Starting off with the quarterbacks as per usual, but this year is unlike the others just because it's kind of a weird crop. You know, there's no consensus number one, debatably no consensus first round picks. So it's gonna be curious to see how we have them ranked. I feel like there's gonna be a lot of variance on this episode.
Yeah, it's interesting too because I was thinking about our summer scouting last year when some of the big names at the top ended up going at the top. Talking about Caleb Williams, talking about Drake May. We talked about JJ McCarthy through summer scouting, but obviously a guy like Jaden Daniels has a great year, ends up going number 2. So, like you said, curious to see who out of this crop really establishes himself this season because there's going to be guys, even in a lackluster class, of what we think is right now, there's going to be a couple guys who step up, have great seasons, and end up to be first-round picks. It's just the way it goes. I mean, Kenny Pickett was a first-round pick.
It's true. It's just the nature of the position in the league. Obviously, it's the most important position of all sports. So, someone's going to play their way in. I'm curious to see who you think. If you have any like outside, like flyers that you think are
Oh,
going
I
to rise.
got him.
I have,
Oh, I
I
got
got
him.
one or two. So I'm curious to see how this goes.
Yeah, it was my board is definitely not consensus, I'll say that. But let's get right to it. We're going 5 through 1, and then we'll touch on some guys that were outside, some other guys that we watched that we didn't like as much, and we'll talk about those guys. So, Ray, who you got at number 5?
So I'm going to start off with my sleeper pick, who I think has the possibility to rise into a first round contention. I'm going to go Jackson Dart from Ole Miss. I really liked him. I feel like typically a lot of people have him in that 8 to 10 range, but for me, he's my number 5 guy. 6'2", 220. I'm not sure if he's going to measure in at 6'2", but he's thick, dude. He's got an NFL body for sure. He can hold up. This is a guy who's a senior. He transferred from USC once that like regime left. He decided to come with Lane Kiffin, and he's someone I like him because he has 28 starts in a Power 5 program. So he's someone who got experience. He's going to probably have 40 starts by the time he reaches the draft, which is something that you love to see. In 2023, he had a really good year. 64.5% completion percentage, about 3,300 yards, 23 touchdowns, 5 picks. And on top of that, he's got some mobility, 391 rushing yards, 8 rushing touchdowns. So I think the fact that he has that dual threat ability, and I don't think he's really a runner as much as he is a scrambler, and he's kind of like a playmaker. He likes to distribute the ball. What I really like about him, he's got a really quick release that I think is going to help him in the league. It's kind of a 3/4, and I guess with his lack of elite height, it could be a little bit concerning. He did get some passes tipped, but I'm not overly worried about that. I would like to see him clean up some of his mechanics a little bit, but what I really like about him the most is just his mobility in the pocket. I feel like he keeps his head up a lot. He has really good footwork. He's able to step up in the pocket as opposed to being a drifter. That's one of my biggest pet peeves in college quarterbacks is when they feel the pressure, they kind of just start drifting away and just rely on their legs to try to out athlete people. He's someone he's got subtle movements. He's willing to step up and then fire strikes and just take hits, which I really love to see. Really fleshes really nice ball placement outside the numbers too. He's got some nice deep outs that he hits where it's just either the wide receiver's getting it or no one's getting it, which I really love to see. He only had 9 turnover-worthy plays. It's 2% of his passes, which was pretty good amongst all the guys that I'm going to be listing today. And what really surprised me was his 10.5 yards ADOT. I feel like just when you have the preconceived notion of a Lane Kiffin offense, it's very quick, designed, like one read plays. And obviously there is a fair share of that in this offense, but you saw a lot of where I feel like at least I did, where he's going through his reads and he's hitting his third read like on a deep out or over the middle, which I really did love to see. And it was just surprising because going into it, I thought it was going to be a gimmicky offense, kind of like a Marcus Mariota back in the day. And that just wasn't the case. I was really impressed with what I saw out of him there. Some of the negatives, I think he doesn't have an elite arm. I think it's good. I think it's strong enough for sure, but he kind of puts all of his body into it, which leads me a little bit concerned, but I think it's good enough for the league for sure. And I think number 2 biggest concern for me is the ball placement is very inconsistent. I think it's kind of a mechanical thing. He does that that like Zach Wilson is just the one I say
Yeah.
in bad. If you're thinking about it as good, it's Aaron Rodgers, that little back leg drag. I fucking despise that. I really hope you can just limit it. It's cool when you can do it, but the fact that you repeatedly do it over and over and then the ball sails on you, I just don't like that at all. So I really think he needs to clean up his mechanics on his lower body. And then also he has this weird ball tap where I feel like it kind of like he has a quick release, but that little extra like millisecond, I think if you can cut that down, you'll be really, really good, especially with that 3/4 release. I think it'll help him. And then he's got to get better looking off defenders. I think sometimes he can get a little one read happy or just stare down guys. He does flash some like eye manipulation, but not nearly enough. So I got to see the intricacies of that improve for him to really be a first round pick.
Yeah, I have Dart at 7. I saw him pretty similarly to you. Full transparency, I have my number 5, 6, and 7 all have the same exact grade. So they're all in a similar tier. For me, the reason I have him outside is really that one read system. I know you saw he goes through progressions a little bit more. I didn't see that too much, and honestly, I mean there are plays that are schemed up in this Lane Kiffin offense that aren't even open. They're never open, and he's still throwing it. So for me, that's the big thing. I think that's the big growth in this offense that he needs to overcome this season. And I think it's going to happen, especially he's got Trey Harris back. They brought in Antoine Juice Wells, who I was really high on last year in summer scouting. So he's got a lot of weapons to work with this year, and I think this offense is going to expand a little bit more. So I think this is something that he can grow in, and I like what you said that that this is a guy that you think can rise. I agree, but for me right now, I have him outside just because it really is just a one-read system right now. Go ahead.
And one more thing I forgot to touch on too. He's got to limit the hits he takes because he's a big guy, but he does not get down when he scrambles. He'll try to jump you before he slides, and that's not going to be able to hold up in the league. I don't care how big you are. So as a quarterback, you got to know to protect your body. So I don't know if he's going to be able to show that off as in college. I feel like he's going to just keep doing his thing, but when he gets to the league, he's got to learn to slide.
Yeah, he is extremely tough, though. I mean, there are a ton of examples of throws where guys are in his face and he'll stand in there and make throws, which I can really appreciate. But like you said, he's got to get down when he's out of the pocket. But he's a good one, man, and they should have a really, really explosive offense again this year. So he's not a bad bet to make a big rise this year. For me, I got Jalen Daniels, my boy from Kansas, at number 5, 6 foot, 220. So a little on the smaller side, but this is a thick quarterback, and you see it on tape. I mean, he's got beef for days, and this is a guy that I think could hold up in the NFL. I know he's battled a ton of injuries over the past few years. This past season, threw for 700 yards, 5 touchdowns, and 1 interception, with almost 75% completion percentage. He only played in the first 3 games of the season, though, with a back injury. He tweaked his back in the offseason and during spring practice, and then was just never really right. And he played through it those first 3 games and actually looked really good doing it. And then right before, I believe it was maybe Miami they were supposed to play, he ended up not playing. So he's back. They're talking about he's going to be fully healthy this season. They said he's progressed really well this offseason, and he'll be fully ready to go. He's a redshirt senior, but he only turns 22 in October. So even with all that experience in college, he's still relatively young for a redshirt senior, which is nice. When you turn on the tape, man, this guy is just so much fun. In 2022, had an outstanding season, threw for over 2,000 yards, 18 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, and he also ran for 419 yards and 7 touchdowns. He's an extremely, extremely elusive runner. He's shifty in the open field. And in the pocket. I mean, his pocket presence is outstanding. He always knows where blitzers are coming from, and he's able to move his body and get out of the way. He's really hard to take down. He can always make a man miss and get out in the open field. And he also finds receivers downfield. He's not one of these guys that when he makes a guy miss in the pocket, he's looking to pull it down. He's looking to run. He keeps his eyes up, and he finds his receivers out in the middle of the field. He only took 7 sacks in 2022, and for a runner, so-called, that's excellent. He's got a good arm. He can make all the throws. His arm is really elastic. He's kind of got that baseball style thrower, like that shortstop style mentality, but extremely elastic. He's got that whip effect, which really gives him good velocity towards the intermediate part of the field. ball placement on short area throws is outstanding. There are two plays that I really loved watching the Illinois game that he was in last year, especially down in the red zone. It seems like easy throws when he's on, the 5 yard line. He's just lobbing it over and guys look wide open. But to throw those balls outside the numbers away from defenders where it's just easy catches, if those balls are inside, they could be picks or pass deflection. So really good ball placement on short and intermediate throws. His touch on the run, I think, is really what separates him from a couple of these guys that I have stacked together in my 5, 6, 7 range. He doesn't need to fire balls in, which most guys feel like they do when they're on the move. It's usually just one fastball. He's got really good touch when he's on the run. He can really change his pace. And man, he's got a big opportunity this year. I think this is a guy that could rise. Devin Neal, the running back, is back, who was outstanding last year, and he's got all three of his top receivers back. Grimm, Arnold, and Skinner are all very good players in this Big 12. I think it could be open for them. I think they could be contenders to win the Big 12. So he's got a big opportunity this season. For me, some of the weaknesses right now with that arm motion, it is elastic, but it's a little bit of a longer throwing motion to get more velocity. It causes some errant balls. So it's just more room for error. When you're taking that ball back a little farther, it's a little more looping. There's just more that can go wrong. The injury concern, obviously, is the big one for him, for a smaller quarterback, we'll call it. But everything seems to be on track. And then he also has a tendency to play a little bit hero ball. Like a lot of these really high-powered college quarterbacks, they like to put everything on their shoulders. I think that stuff needs to come down. He does so much for this offense, and they do have a lot of weapons. I think he can just trust his playmakers, get the ball out in space, get it to those receivers, get it to his backs, and he'll be fine. I'll be really curious to see what happens with this offense. They've talked about it without Andy Kotelnicki, who is now at Penn State, their former offensive coordinator. Lance Leipold talked about this offense being eerily similar to what they've been running, but be curious to see what happens with this offense and Jalen Daniels. But, man, he is extremely fun, and I'm very excited to have him back on the field.
Yeah, admittedly, I didn't really get a chance to watch him for summer state outing. I just kind of like have a preconceived notion that he was more of a college quarterback. I feel like that Kansas offense is so run heavy and a little gimmicky, and then combine that with just him being 6 foot, and that's listed in college. I feel like he's probably gonna be sub 6 foot. I just didn't really think of him as a legitimate prospect. So I'll have to go dive into the tape before the season starts and then see how he does this year.
Yeah, it was less gimmicky than I thought it was going to be, and I had been previously watching a lot of Kansas. Obviously, big Penn State fan, so watching this offense with Andy Kotelnicki, trying to see how he's bringing some of these concepts over to Penn State, it's less gimmicky than I thought. Obviously, they are very run-centric, but they do a lot of NFL-type concepts, so be curious to see how that affects his draft stock. But, yeah, man, he's a fun one, and can't wait to see him back on the field. But for you, who you got at number 4?
For me, I got Shedeur Sanders from Colorado, obviously. 6'2", 215. He's another one. I feel like he's just got really good size and like maturity. He's not one of those skinny kids who like looks like he won't hold up in the NFL. I think he's got plenty of just size to be able to handle it, and great athleticism too, where he's not much of a runner, but again, he'll take the yards in front of him, which I really do love to see. And what I like about him too, he knows how to get down, unlike Jackson Dart. Jackson Dart's kind of trying to run all over the place. He's someone who'll just get down. But to Shedeur, people kind of like forget because he went to Jackson State, obviously, but he was a legitimate high school recruit. Number 61 overall. I think he was the number 13 quarterback in that class. So, but he just followed his dad, obviously, to Jackson State before going to Colorado. And this past year, crazy efficient, 68.5% completion percentage, 3,200 yards, 27 touchdowns, only 3 picks. And then he added 379 rushing yards with 4 touchdowns. The one thing that I really like about him is just I feel like his maturity before pre-snap. I feel like he has a lot of responsibility to audible and check things out. And I think that leads to him being very deliberate post-snap. Because he's at his best on those short intermediate passes, like you said about Jalen Daniels. He's really efficient, getting the ball out quick, and I feel like his ball placement on those underneath routes is really good. I feel like he got like kind of got hung out to dry by his receiver sometimes, where like I feel like he was seeing the game completely differently than some of his receivers were, which caused it to look like some of his passes to look a little bit erratic. Where as opposed to, I just think they were like kind of option routes, and his guys kind of just weren't seeing it what he was seeing. But he's got a really quick release, standard throwing motion, which you love to see. He's not going to get many balls tipped at the line of scrimmage, rather. And I just love the fact that he is deliberate and protects the football. This is someone that I think NFL coaches, despite that off-field kind of like mantra that he has, I think they're going to really like him just because he knows what he's doing, and I feel like he just is really responsible quarterback, which is what guys love to see. On the negatives, his arm is the worst that we'll probably talk about today. I don't know if you have anyone else that I don't have on my list, but his arm is very average. You can see it when it's like throwing downfield. It kind of just hangs up there a little bit, which is, I mean, it's not the end all be all. Like I think, like I said, if his knowledge of the offense and he gets into a West Coast system, it doesn't really matter too much. But I think it's going to be cause for some concern. And then, as I mentioned, on the opposite with Jackson Dart, like yes, Shedeur Sanders knows how to get down, but he's a drifter too, big time drifter back in the pocket. And that's very concerning. But I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt. That offensive line was absolutely abysmal. I think he got sacked 49 times last year. It should be better. I think they brought in a bunch of transfers. They had that one freshman too, I think, who's the number one offensive tackle who should start. So I'm very curious to see if he can kind of develop that part of his game and just obviously be more deliberate getting the ball out, which he was, but just take sacks, just step up and just deliver the ball, throw the ball away a little bit more. I don't care if that completion percentage drops like 5 to 10 points. Just you can't be drifting and taking those 10-yard losses. And I guess also to like counter that too as well, that they were trailing a lot in games after the first 3 weeks. So he kind of had to play some hero ball at points. So hopefully they're playing a little bit tighter games, and we'll see that that negative go away a little bit. And then that offense again, like. That offense was so gimmicky too. There were a lot of just screens and just get the ball out quick. I guess that could be because of the offensive line they were working with, but I want to see them work a little bit more down the field. I think his ADOT was only 8 yards. It may have even been under 8 yards, if I'm not mistaken. So I want to see him work a little bit more down the field, work a little bit more NFL concepts. And then I mentioned it, but like the off-field antics too. I think that's going to be a cause for concern. So I'd like to see a quieter season and just less flash and more production on the field. Hopefully get them to a ball game.
Yeah, he's fascinating because, I mean, he's getting talked about as possibly being a top 5 pick type of player. I don't see it that way. I got Shedeur Sanders at number 6, so he's just outside my top 5. I pretty much agree with everything you said. The big thing for me, why I have him outside my top 5 right now and not with these other quarterbacks, I just don't feel like he's an elevator compared to some of these other guys. I want my quarterbacks to elevate the play around me, and I just don't feel like he's that type of player right now. Of course, he's coming into a brand new situation. His dad is the head coach. He's got a lot of stuff going on, so I get all that, and maybe, like you said, in year 2, it looks a little bit cleaner, a little more smooth sailing off the field too, that he could just focus all of his stuff on the field. But on the field, I just don't feel like he elevates his team as much as some of these other guys. His accuracy is outstanding, especially in the short and intermediate area of the field. Like you said, I think he's quicker than people give him credit for. He actually does a really good job stepping up when there's pressure around him. And man, I will give him credit. He is tough as shit. That offensive line, like you said, is so bad. They played with basically no running back all year, too. Like, they didn't run the ball at all. So everybody knows he's throwing. Defenses are licking their chops to go after him. So I praise him for all that. But in terms of being an NFL caliber prospect, I just don't know if he's there yet. Like you said, the drifting from pressure needs to improve, and granted, that offensive line is so bad, but he works back far too often. The deep ball accuracy, I think, needs some work. They need to incorporate some more NFL concepts for him, too, if he wants to be a legit NFL player. I think just when that first read isn't there, I think he struggles to go find that second read and really go make plays for his team. So for those reasons, I have Shedeur just outside, but this is a fascinating player. because they do have a lot of talent on that team, and hopefully they put it together this year.
And I agree with a lot of what you just said too. But the one thing I'll like kind of push back on is, yes, he's not much. He may not be an elevator, but we see what game managers do in the NFL. Like what that, like especially in like a what you call a Shanahan type scheme. I feel like those are like that's what you want him to. You want to surround him with talent, maybe with a good offensive line, and just let him distribute the ball. Because I really do think his pre-snap awareness is very, very good. And I mean, there's really it's a lot of speculation on our part. Obviously, they're not really going to know that until you get into meetings with him. But I do have a feeling that coaches are going to love that about him.
Right. And this is why I love summer scouting, because this is the time you take swings. Nobody's going to remember your rankings by the time we get to actual rankings when the NFL draft comes around. So it's fun, man. I mean,
it's the battle between traits and floor.
It is. It really is. And I love projections, man. Who doesn't? Because then if you're wrong, who gives a fuck? I was taking a swing. But that's he's a good one, and looking forward to seeing some Colorado this year in the Big 12. New look Big 12. All right, for me, number 4, I got Quinn Ewers out of Texas. He's a mainstay on these summer scouting episodes. I believe I had him at 3 last year. I think you also had him possibly at 3 last year as well. Got to go check the tape again.
I think I'm at 4, I want to say. I think I had JJ ahead of him.
Nice. All right, so Quinn Ewers, 6'2", 205. This past season for Texas had just shy of 3,500 passing yards, 22 touchdowns, 6 interceptions on 68.5% completion percentage. I think for him this past year, he showed continued improvement, especially with his timing of throws, his overall football IQ. I thought he did an excellent job at really getting that offense in spots where they needed to be. And then the ball placement, I think it still has a little bit of ways to go, but I think he improved tremendously this past year in his overall ball placement. So that was really nice to see. I mean, his best trait, we talked about it last year in summer scouting, but his overall feel as a thrower, it's like that natural arm talent that people always talk about. That's what he has. The ability to layer balls over linebackers and in front of safeties. I mean, if you take the top 10 throws of every single guy that we watched, Quinn's probably got the 10 best. He is just an outstanding talent that really just needs to put everything all together for him to be a high-level NFL prospect. He is quick and elusive in the pocket. I think that was another thing he really grew at. He's extremely tough to take down in the pocket. He's shifty. He's got good footwork. It allows him to evade pressure and make throws off script, which he's excellent at. And then his just raw arm strength is really impressive too. When he works off of play action and he unloads it, it's really pretty. He throws with easy velocity, and he really knows when to change pace of his football. He really knows when to layer throws in. For him, the weaknesses, I think it's still kind of the same as I had last year. He still needs to add some size. He's pretty frail, especially in the lower half. I still think he needs to beef up. He still has technical flaws in throwing the football. It has issues with his inconsistencies in his in mechanics. It's just not always repeatable for him. Every throw looks a little bit different. So I think for him, getting a throwing motion that's a little more repeatable will help some of those ball placement issues, some of those bad throws that you'll see it on tape. I mean, there are just plays that guys are wide open and he just completely misses them. Like those plays need to get hit. Those plays need to be better for him. So I think this year is really, really important for him. The downfield accuracy also was a big issue this past year. I think 34% completion percentage on throws, 20 or more yards down the field. So I think those need to come up a little bit more. And then for him, just taking the easy throw also. He's another one, the hero ball or trying to make the home run play with guys in traffic. Too many times he's looking for the home run play. Just take a check down sometimes. Sometimes the best play is the check down and throwing it away. Live to fight another down. So for him, I think that stuff is really, really important on the mental side. And then obviously physically with his throwing motion, I think he still has a little bit of ways to go. But they're talking about him really highly this year. So was kind of surprising that neither he or Arch Manning transferred this year. So I want to see what happens with that relationship. But they got to the college football playoff last year, and I think if he can grow on that, he could find himself in the first round.
Yeah. So I have Quinn at 2,
Nice.
and I agree with pretty much everything you said. But I mean, the reason I love him, I mean, on like surface level, is obviously that arm talent's crazy. He has insane arm strength, and what I like more, I think I know his deep ball accuracy, like percentage wise, wasn't that good, but I love the touch he puts on that ball. He has those fucking
The
moon
moon
balls
balls.
that Caleb Williams throws. He gets so fucking elevated and just lets his receivers obviously run under them. I'm very curious to see how him and Isaiah Bond work this year, because I mean, Isaiah Bond's one of the highly touted names in the receivers in this draft. So I think that could be a really good matchup, obviously, or target for him. And then but like digging deep, when I rewatched in the summer, his feet are really clean. I didn't realize how clean his footwork was in the pocket in particular. And I had written down creative playmaker, because he's someone, when he's scrambling, I feel like he just kind of, I feel like he sees the game a little differently. He's not afraid to, like you said, to layer those balls in over the second level on the move, and kind of like no looking, like sidearm. He does some crazy shit. But also, when he sees open grass, he runs. He's pretty mobile. He's obviously not going to be burned anything in the 40, but he can get those yards if you give him room for free. And another one, he gets down, which I love to see. He knows that he's not Caleb Williams or Lamar Jackson. He knows that he has to take what he can get down and go. On the negatives, that release is disgusting. I don't know if it's, I mean, I don't think it's changeable, which is really concerning, but he gets so many balls batted down at the line of scrimmage just because he drops his elbow so much, it's so low, and he's not the biggest guy, like you mentioned. So it's just going to lead to a lot of balls getting batted down. So I'd like to see him try to making that more efficient, at least. Bring it up just a little bit, and I feel like you're going to get a lot of those balls
They changed Debo's
through.
throwing motion.
Did they? It's like, sorry, I don't want to get too off, but going back and looking at Tebow's NFL highlights, dude, that release was the longest thing I've ever seen in my life. It's crazy that he's a first round pick. But anyway, other than that, I think you also said too, I think I'd like to see him just take those easy throws, take the checkdowns. He does try to look downfield so much. I don't know if it's that Sarkisian offense that like they're just like, fuck it. They had so many weapons. Let's just go downfield, make it a track meet. But I'm very curious to see him this year, because he lost his starting running back, starting tight end, and his top 3 receivers. So I think they're returning both those tackles, if I'm not mistaken.
And tight end.
So I think their offensive line should be a lot better, but he's lost all of his weapons. I mean, I know the transfer portal makes it a little bit easier to kind of retool every year, but he's got a uphill battle. He's going to have to take on a major leadership role this year. And before we move on from him, I don't know if I texted you this the other day when I was watching him, but do you think he regrets transferring from Ohio State? Because he could have had 2 seasons starting for them after CJ Stroud.
No, I mean they went to the college football playoff last year.
Yeah, but imagine what Ohio State could have done with Quinn Ewers over Kyle McCord. Like, look at the situation imagine the situation that he has now, losing single one of his starters, to if he went to Ohio State, the tools he'd have around him.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, because like he still could have transferred this year. You know what I mean?
True.
Like I mean, we talked about it maybe before the draft, like possibly a place like USC, like bringing him in. I know they have a bunch of
that would have been a real tough look, though.
I mean, that's the day and age that we're in right now. But I mean,
True.
And all these people are clamoring for Arch Manning. Like it, I was curious to see if either one of them transferred. I'm really surprised neither of them transferred. But I don't think he does, because, like I said, they went to the playoff last year. They're probably going to go to the playoff this year too.
Expanded
with expansion. Yeah, it's going to be the playoff. Penn State in the playoff. We won't talk about expansion. So I don't think he regrets it, because obviously he's still the starter. So I don't know. Grass isn't always greener, right?
I guess.
Fuck Ohio State. All right, let's move on. Who you got at number 3?
Oh, I'm up. Okay,
Yeah,
I have Carson Beck at 3.
Ooh,
from Georgia. Yeah, so I'm a little lower than most people think. He's an old school prototype, 6'4", 220, big guy. I didn't really realize how tall he was, and just overall big. But he's a 5th-year senior from Jacksonville. He was a 4-star recruit coming out, number 234 overall. And he did his time sitting behind Stetson Bennett. He's had his first full year as a starter. He threw for almost 4,000 yards with 24 touchdowns, 6 picks. 17 big time throws, 11 turnover worthy plays, which is a little bit more than the other guys we've mentioned on this list, and only 8.5 average depth of target, which was kind of surprising given this offense. But I guess he did rely on Bowers a lot for those manufactured touches. But this is a guy really clean mechanics all around, quick release. He's tall. He's not getting balls bad down at the line of scrimmage. Very clean feet. And I like his ability to layer balls over the middle, over those linebackers. That one throw, I think it was against Kentucky on that.
That throw is
Kind of like
disgusting.
yeah, that throw was really, really nice. And I like how he's a quick decision maker. He's someone, I think he kind of knows the role that this offense is. I mean, this Georgia team has been doing it for years now, where it's just a well-oiled machine. Like he knows I just have to give the ball to my players. We're more talented than 99.999% of teams. So my job is to distribute. And he does that very efficiently. And I think on the negatives, I feel like this whole class, besides a couple of people, I don't think he has the strongest arm. I know you kind of disagree with me when we were talking
I
a little
do.
bit off the pod. I think his arm's very average. I don't think he has any mobility. I mean, I know I'm not really the biggest like runner guy, but I think he is. I don't. He's probably the least athletic guy on this list for me, at least. I think he's kind of I don't want to say statue. I think that's a little bit overstating it, but he's just doesn't. He's not going to be a scrambler. You know, he was only sacked 12 times, but they also have the best offensive line pretty much in the SEC. So you're not really going to get much of a playmaker. And to be honest, he doesn't have any wow traits for me. It's very steady Eddie across the board. And I don't know if I can count this as a negative, but I do. The fact that you took over a back-to-back championship team and you don't make the playoffs, I think that's a red flag for me. So he's number 3 for me. I'm very curious to see how he does this year.
Yeah, I'm not going to put that Alabama loss on him. That was such a weird game, and like he played pretty well in that game. I don't think he threw for a touchdown, but he played pretty well in that game if I remember
No, he
correctly.
didn't play bad.
So I'm not going to kill him for not making the playoff because they were banged up as well. But yeah, I have Carson Beck at number 1. It is just not a flashy class right now, man. That's what it is. The comparison I came up with was Alex Smith, honestly. Play style. I feel like that's a really good comp for who he is as a player. He is extremely smart with the football. For him, like you said, this is a loaded offense every year, but I think he does a really good job of going through all of his progressions. You see his eyes work 1 to 2 to 3 in his progressions. I think he does a really good job setting up linebackers and safeties, moving guys with his eyes. I think he's really advanced in that compared to a lot of these other guys that we have on his list. Like you said, the clean mechanics are excellent. I think he's the cleanest of all the guys that I watched. His head, his eyes, his shoulders, and his feet are always working together, which is really nice to see. I think his poise in the pocket. I also have, like, for weaknesses, I have not a creator with his legs, but I do think he does a really good job at moving in the pocket, similar to what like Tom Brady does. Like Tom Brady was never a creator, but Tom Brady was really hard to take down in the pocket because he had such good feel and awareness about where blitzers were coming from, where pressure was coming from. So I think he kind of has those similar traits. Ball placement is really good, and velocity towards the intermediate part of the field is really, really solid. I think he has a bigger arm than what you're giving him credit for. I don't think he has a massive arm like way down the field, but I think his velocity in the intermediate part of the field in that 10 to 20 range is really, really good. I think he's got a quick release, and I think he can really snap balls down the field. For the weaknesses right now, I really agreed with everything he said. Like I mentioned, really not a creator with his legs. He can escape outside the pocket, but he's never going to win with his legs. When he gets pressured, he can get sped up a little bit, which causes inaccuracies. You see some weird stuff in his footwork when he gets sped up, when he's not comfortable in that final step in his drop back, and he's got to move a little bit quicker. That tends to speed him up. And then the last thing I wrote, he forced a lot of balls into Brock Bowers, and rightfully so. Brock Bowers is fucking awesome. If I was their quarterback, I'd be forcing the ball to him too. But there are just plays like it's not there, and he's still forcing the ball, trying to make Bowers go make a play. So I'd be really curious to see how he grows in that area this year without his number one target. So I'm really looking forward to watching him, seeing how he grows. I know you said he doesn't have like an elite trait. I think his elite trait is his mental makeup for me. So that's why I got him at number one. I think he's just a little bit further along maturity wise, football IQ wise than the rest of these guys.
Hey, that's fair.
All right, now let's talk about a guy who really isn't mature and has no playing experience at all. For my number three, Garrett Nussmeier, who only has one career start in a bowl game from LSU. This is why I fucking love summer scouting, man. Let's take some swings.
Take some swings, baby.
So only one start this past year, playing behind Jaden Daniels for the past few seasons. In their game against Wisconsin in the bowl game, he was 35 for 41 with 395 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 interception. That interception really wasn't his fault either. He also had a 98-yard game-winning drive to end that game. Big projection here, but, man, I think he's got some real arm talent. And I think with his strong offensive line that he's got in this year, he's got 2 first-round offensive tackles with him. He's got Kyron Lacey back. He's got Chris Hilton back. I think sky's the limit this year for this LSU offense. For me, his best trait, the ball placement and accuracy, is outstanding. And people are talking about this in high school. This was his trait. This was what he made his game on, is the ball placement and accuracy. He made some incredible throws in that game down the field. But in the short and intermediate area of the field, I think is really where he makes his money. He gives wide receivers really easy grab and go balls where they can just catch on the run. They're never stopping their route. So I think he does a really good job in that aspect. He's a full field reader. He's got an extremely high football IQ. He makes quick decisions about where to go with the football. He isn't afraid to make any throw. He has total confidence in himself. Sometimes it comes at a cost, but he really does have full belief in himself. And then a couple other things that I'm pushing him up my board a little bit in terms of projection. Family bloodlines we love, especially for quarterbacks. His father was a pro. His father has also been a longtime quarterbacks coach in the NFL. He's with the Dallas Cowboys. He was with the LA Chargers, and now he's with the Philadelphia Eagles as their quarterbacks coach. So he's got quarterback football in his blood. And then just the way LSU coaches and his teammates are talking about him right now in terms of his leadership, his preparation in the film room, and his character about not transferring these past few years, waiting for his opportunity to play for LSU is just really nice to see. And I just have a lot of confidence in him this season, just leading this LSU offense to be really, really dominant once again. Some of the weaknesses, he's a gunslinger, man. He wants to make every play. We talk about that with a lot of these guys, but he takes some unnecessary chances with the football that just need to be cleaned up. He's not a big-time athlete. He does have a little twitch in the pocket in terms of his elusiveness, but running down the field, making guys miss in the open field, he's not going to give you much of that. And then he's a limited physical athlete. He's 6'2", 200 pounds. He's got to put on a little bit more weight. So he's on the smaller side, so I want to see him get up, to around 210. I think that's good playing weight for him, but man, he's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm really looking forward to seeing him prove me right.
I respect the lotto ticket here. I personally didn't watch him. I didn't watch someone who played one game in bowl season. That doesn't matter personally.
Hey, Wisconsin was playing all their starters.
But I respect the grind. I respect it. I'm curious to see how he does. And I mean, quarterback's taking over high-powered offense. It's worth the fucking dart throw. So we'll see if it pays off. But maybe I'll go watch that bowl game and see what I think. Because
and
admittedly haven't seen it.
It's funny. Obviously, it's summer scouting. I'm watching less games. I'm trying to watch as many guys as I can, so I'm watching less games than when we normally do our scouting. So for him, only having one real game and then highlights thrown in when they're up 50 against other teams, this was one of the best games I watched from any of these guys. That's also why I got him so high. So in terms of just the one physical game that he played, this was one of the most impressive performances I saw from any of these guys.
Respect.
All right, who you got at number 2? Oh, you had Quinn, right?
2 was Quinn.
Okay. Okay, so I have my number 2 and your number 1 left. I'm assuming it's the same player, unless I know you have a lot of love for my boy Drew Aller. Is Drew Aller number 1?
Dude, that guy
Oh,
sucks.
fuck. All right, let's talk about Connor Wegman because I'm assuming that's who you have.
That is my number
Okay.
one. Yes.
You go ahead here because he's your number one.
Yeah. So I mean, talking about guys who haven't really played much. I mean, he's had 4 starts this past year before a season-ending, I think, foot injury, and then he
Yep.
had 4 starts as a true freshman to like end the season. I think between the 2 years, he has 16 touchdowns, 2 picks. So he's been ultra effective. In 2023, I think he had 8 touchdowns, 2 picks, 10.1 average depth of target, which I love. And he completed about 69% of his passes. So what I like about him, he's got, great size, 6'3", 213. He's listed at. He may be probably closer to 6'2",
Mm-hmm.
but he's got adequate thickness where it's not going to be a problem in the NFL. But he is a gunslinger. Probably the strongest arm in this class in terms of just pure velocity. He's fearless the way when he attacks the middle of the field. I just love the velocity, the touch, the just willingness to try to squeeze it in just minuscule openings. He's kind of just an old school type of quarterback, but he's another one really clean feet. And he's someone who doesn't drift in the pocket, which I love. He's willing to step up and take a big hit to the face and deliver a strike. He takes yards that he sees. He's another one. He's kind of got to learn to get down a little bit better, but especially given his injury history.
Yeah.
But it's traits that you love to see that are there. And another trait that I love that I didn't really see with many of these other guys, but he is a fiery competitor. When he misses, I saw him miss the one throw wide open. It's not good. Wide open touchdown in the Miami game, and he was just livid. He started. He's like flailing his arms and shit. Where I guess it's kind of like a give and take. You don't want him to get too emotional, but I love to see the fiery competitiveness. And on some of the negatives, I mentioned only 8 career starts, so this is a lot of projection here. He can lose his base. I feel like when he's moving on the move, and that's what kind of leads to some of his inaccuracies. He can sail some balls a little bit. And I'd like to see him get a little bit more efficient with his release. He's another one similar to Jackson Dart. He puts a lot of effort into his throws. Every single one. He's just fucking letting it rip. So I like to see him get a little bit more efficient and just a little quicker, smoother, and just more deliberate. In terms of player comparison, I have 2. And it's wild. It's wild, but like I think I'm gonna have to go with this. Fitzmagic. He reminds me of Fitzpatrick a lot. Just the throwing really motion, just the way he plays, just the gunslinger mentality. I know it's kind of tough when he's my number one quarterback in the class, having Fitzmagic. The second person was kind of Sam Darnold. I think he's got a similar build and athletic traits. But just mentality and just the way he plays it's all Fitzpatrick to me. So I love this player. I'm really curious to see how he does in this Mike Elko offense. I think they're going to kind of emphasize that athleticism a little bit more too, where I think he's going to be a riser. I think he ends up taking the cake as QB1 in this class.
Yeah, he is a lot of fun, like you said. I really agree with most of everything you said. There were a few things, especially for his weaknesses, that I'll get to. But I'll start with the strengths. Like you said, just an absolute missile of a right arm. The ball absolutely flies out of his hand. And he has that like little hitch too, which I don't love. It's almost like that push, like Phillip Rivers type of throw. But the ball just flies out of his hand. So he can really make all the throws all over the field. He's got real natural arm talent. Similarly, like how we talk about Quinn Ewers, there are just very few throws in this class that he can't make that anybody else can. So really love that. He's a full field reader too. I was really impressed by that too. As a really young player, I thought he did a really good job of using his eyes to go through progressions. Like you really see it on tape, him move from 1 to 2 to 3. So want to see him continue to grow in that area. But I thought for a young player, that was really impressive. Tough as shit, man. He'll stand in there, make throws with guys in his face. He will lower his shoulder when he's running. Want to see him get down a little bit more, like you said. But, man, he is ultra, ultra competitive in that aspect. I think you also mentioned this. He really knows how to attack the middle of the field, too. He does not look for the outer parts of the field too often. He is really looking to chase linebackers and balls in front of safeties. Like he's looking for that open green grass. So I love that. And the last thing I wrote, on third down, he always goes after the sticks. He never throws balls short of the sticks. He is a first down hunter. Sometimes that gets him into trouble. Man, I really can appreciate you trying to extend drives for your team. So I love that type of mentality. For the weaknesses right now, that hitch in the throwing motion, it just causes a couple balls to be late. Like you can see it. He's starting to gear up and he's starting to let the ball go, and then it just like sits in his hand for a half a second too long. So like you said, want to see that get cleaned up. Want to be a little bit more deliberate in that throwing motion, and I think he can. I know you said he didn't drift too much. I thought he drifted a little too often, especially in that Miami game. It kind of looked like they were having some issues with the turf of the field in that game because he kept like falling and slipping. I don't know if that was just like the field, but he was drifting a little bit too often. It's funny because he's like a good athlete when he gets in the open field, but when he scrambles, he doesn't look like a good athlete. It's odd. Like
I can see
when
that.
he moves backwards, it like doesn't look natural at all. But when he moves up in the pocket, when he looks to take off and run, it looks a lot cleaner. Really interesting. And then he just has some weird like lower body technical issues. Sometimes like his base isn't fully set and he's throwing with all arm or too wide and he's planting weird. He also just had some weird like movement with his handoffs for his lower body. There were a lot of like
Interesting.
there were a lot
I
of like
noticed
just
that.
like delayed handoffs that just weren't so clean. So, but again, really young player. I think a lot of that stuff can get cleaned up easily. But the natural makeup of him as a thrower, as a competitor, I love, and is why I got him at number 2, and cannot knock you for having him at number 1.
Nice.
All right, let's roll through our 1 through 5s, and then let's touch on some guys outside. So, who you got 1 through 5?
1 is Connor Wegman from Texas A&M. 2, Quinn Ewers from Texas. 3, Carson Beck from Georgia. 4, Shador Sanders from Colorado. And 5, Jackson Dart from Ole Miss.
Nice. So for me, at 1, I got Carson Beck from Georgia. 2 is Connor Wegman from Texas A&M. 3 is Garrett Nussmeier, the new LSU quarterback. 4 is Quinn Ewers from Texas. And then 5 is Jalen Daniels out of Kansas. I'll just ask you before we get to these other guys, are any of these guys first-round picks as of now?
No.
I don't.
No, I think
I agree.
I think a couple of day 2 maybe, but I don't think anyone's gonna be a first round. Maybe I think if anyone, maybe Quinn, just because he's had the experience and he's got that like raw arm. But even him, no, probably not.
It's going to be fascinating, man. I can't wait to watch this season. All right, let's get to a couple guys outside of our top 5s. Who you want to talk about?
Yeah, I'll just go quick with my 2 guys. Will Howard, obviously from Kansas State, transferring to Ohio State. I mean, you can't not talk about him just because he's got freakish tools. 6'5", 242. He's got a rocket of an arm, and he's got mobility to boot too. And then you couple that with him going to the best supporting cast in the country. I just think he's kind of due to have a big year. And if he has a big year in a class like this, he's going to rise and be talked about just because of those tools too. So when you can throw to Emeka Ibuka, Carnell Tate, Jeremiah Smith, Brandon Innes, they have just 5-star galore. And then not to mention Trevion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins in that backfield. He's set up for success. So a big year from him. I think he'll get his name start talking about within the first 2 days. And then also the second guy, Cade Klubnik from Clemson. This is a guy who was number 1 quarterback recruit rather in the country. He took over for DJ as a freshman towards the end of that year. He had really high hopes for him, and he kind of disappointed. I mean, Clemson as a whole disappointed last year. And I feel like with him, ironically, it's the exact opposite of Will Howard. I don't think he's in the best situation. I think this Clemson program's kind of in a little bit of a free fall. I think Dabo Swinney's arrogance and just stubbornness to not kind of like adapt with the times is going to kind of haunt them a little bit. But this guy, he's another one. He's kind of reminds me of the same archetype as Connor Wegman, where he's like 6'2", 210, I think he's listed at. He's got a really strong arm. With him, it's just kind of decision making. I think with both of them, actually, it just really comes down to decision making, accuracy, and efficiency. So I'm curious to see if they can step their games up and kind of get into this fray of 10 quarterbacks all in the same playing field.
Yeah, Will Howard's really interesting one. I didn't watch either of those guys, honestly, in my list of 15 guys that I watched. I didn't watch either of them. Will Howard's really interesting. Curious to see how they use his skill set, especially as a runner in this Ohio State offense with all these wide receivers that they have. I mean, let's be honest, they're going to run the rock this year with that backfield. So, like you said, if he goes on and they have a perfect season, maybe he rises a little bit. I don't see him too much as an NFL prospect. But for Klubnik, a guy that I was really high on coming into last year, be curious to see year 2 of that Garrett Riley offense that was formerly at TCU. I think there was a lot of growing pains last year. And, I mean, that wide receiver room just battled so many injuries. And like you said, they just didn't bring in anybody from the transfer portal. So they were just really thin at wide receiver last year. So hopefully they're a little bit more healthy this year, and Cade can grow with some of those guys like Antonio Williams, really good player. So, be curious to see both of them. For me, 2 guys I'm going to talk about. I'll talk about Drew Aller here. I had him at 9, and that is just purely physical tools. Because if it was just play, he probably would have been outside my top 15. 6'5", 243. This past year, you look at the numbers, and they look really good. I mean, 2,600 yards, 25 touchdowns, only 2 interceptions. But, man, when you dive into the tape and you were watching all these games, it's pretty brutal. But for strengths, NFL-ready size, like I mentioned, he's got real zip on the ball, extremely gifted with the right arm. I mean, there are some throws that he had last year, and honestly, some of his best throws are in the first game of the season, which is really disheartening. Some of those throws against West Virginia are just outstanding, him moving up in the pocket and then just launching a ball 40 yards down the field. He could throw from various arm angles. He really doesn't need a lot of room to get balls off, and he really likes to step up in the pocket, which I can really appreciate. But, man, the ball placement and accuracy last year was, I'll call it what it is. It was pathetic last year. I mean, there are just plays where guys are flat out wide open. Me, you, Nikki P, Katie could hit these guys, honestly. I mean, it was really, really frustrating. There's times where he's overstriding, which is causing him to have inaccuracies, or it forces his arm angle to be off. He sometimes relies too much on his arm strength, and he's not throwing guys open. He's throwing when guys are open. So I want to see that get cleaned up. But, man, the ball placement has really got to improve. I am praying that Andy Kotelnicki can get with him, get his mind right, because I think that's a lot of it for him is his confidence and his mental makeup. But the ball placement just needs to improve. He talked about it. He was a big pitcher in high school, and he always said he was either striking guys out or he was walking guys. So that's what it is. He's like an aimer almost with that release. So needs to improve this year if Penn State wants to make the college football playoff, and he doesn't want to get benched, because I've been talking about it. Bo Prabula, baby. Sign him up. Second guy I'll talk about is Jalen Milroe from Alabama. He was fascinating, man. He's some of the funnest tape that you can turn on, and there's also some tape that'll just leave you scratching your head. 6'2", 220. This past season had 2,800 yards, 23 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Just an excellent runner. He's got shiftiness. He's got toughness. Extremely hard to bring down. Can really win with his legs. He's probably the only guy of this list that can really win solely with his legs. An outstanding arm. I mean, he's got excellent velocity. He's got a huge arm, throw the ball down the field. Even in the scramble drill, when he's off balance, I mean, he can launch balls down the field. Just extremely gifted. And if Kalen DeBoer can get with him, rein him in a little bit in some of those technical and mechanical issues that he has, man, he's going to be fascinating to watch his draft stock and see where it could go. But for him, the football IQ just needs to improve. And I think he's with a really good coach in that aspect. This guy just doesn't feel pressure at all. When blitzes are coming, he doesn't see them. He took a ton of sacks because of it, and not all of them are his fault, but a lot of them are just him holding on to the ball too long and not seeing where pressure is. And he's another one. You can really scheme this guy to beat him. Double-digit fumbles were also an issue. Technical issues with his throwing motion and his base just need to get cleaned up. Can be very erratic when his feet are not set. So there's a lot of room for growth with this guy. But man, talk about raw tools. This guy's a ball of clay, and he's got a lot of traits. So he's going to be fascinating to watch.
Yeah, with him, I mean, just his ability to run like he does, because you said he's probably the best runner in this class, and then just his ability to throw it as far as he can. It's going to obviously intrigue teams, but there is just some, like, especially early in the season, dude, he was so bad, man. Like, I just don't know how
he got benched.
He got benched.
And they made the college football playoff.
I just don't know how he's going to do in this DeBoer offense. That just like Penix was so accurate on those balls. I just don't know if he's going to be able to do that. And then talk about accuracy, Drew Aller, that guy is all over the place. And just to be kind, all I can think of is maybe because the wide receiver room was kind of so thin and they weren't getting separation that much. Maybe he was kind of pressing a little bit, but that's being generous. I think this is kind of another Christian Hackenberg-esque story, unfortunately. But I hope he proves me wrong, because someone with those tools too, I mean, it's like in a class that needs a number one quarterback, those tools, if he has a big year, he'll be up there in the first round for sure.
Yeah, hearing Christian Hackenberg's name was a knife in the heart. So thank you for that. Way to ruin my Friday. Yeah, he's going to be fascinating. A couple other guys that we didn't mention that are on our list. Cam Ward, who is now with Miami, Washington State. Man, his tape is crazy too. I think he had 24 big-time throws and 21 turnover-worthy plays. So you really get it on both ends with him. Riley Leonard, who was at Duke, who's now at Notre Dame, big-time runner. Graham Mertz, I'll give Dylan a shout-out here for Florida. Had a good season last year, but need to see a continued maturity and growth for him and really elevate his team. Noah Fafita is a really fun player at Arizona. Small but shifty. And with McMillan there, I think they're going to put up some big numbers. Who are some other guys that I watch? Preston Stone from SMU was fun, but he's a day 3 candidate. And Dylan Gabriel, who's been a mainstay in this college football era, UCF and Oklahoma, who's now at Oregon, and they're going to have a really good offense this year too. So just another couple names for people to watch out.
I'll just say 2 more too. Donovan Smith from Houston. I don't think you brought him up. And then also, hate to say it, but you got Kyle McCord going to Syracuse.
Oh,
curious to see how that works out.
God, I'm good. I'm good. All right, that's going to wrap it up for us here on Between Two Tackles. Thank you for listening. Hopefully you enjoyed our quarterback summer scouting episode. Stay locked in with us. We are just getting started with our summer scouting. We got the Edges coming up next, a really good group, so I'm excited to watch those guys. As always, please rate and subscribe to the pod and follow our Twitter at 2 Tackles with the number 2, and also now follow our YouTube channel at Between Two Tackles with the number 2. We're going to get all these summer scouting videos up on the YouTube channel moving forward, and all of our videos will be up there. So going to post a lot of good content. It's going to be a really, really fun offseason for Between Two Tackles as we lead towards this 2024 college football season, towards this 2024 NFL season. Ray, my friend, I am pumped up to be back. It was great to see you again. Appreciate you.